Welcome back to the Nebraskabilities podcast. My name is Zach. I'm here with my co-hosts Andy and Nate. And today we get to talk about not a whole heck of a lot because Nebraska was on a bye week this last
That
weekend.
means we won.
And so we got a
Only
W in
technically.
the win column because we won the bye week. No, but compared to the last bye week that we had after Oklahoma, we have not nearly as much to talk about this time as we did not have a coach get fired after the bye week this time. So, pretty quiet bye week for Nebraska, but a couple big key points did come out of the bye week. We found out officially now that Nick Henrich is out for the season with a knee injury, which was kind of already being speculated with some of Trev's comments last week and, just kind of the whole thing surrounding it, as well as getting Malachi Coleman to commit to Nebraska, at least verbally. So we'll discuss more about that in a little bit, but I guess not a whole heck of a lot to talk about, but we'll jump right into the press conference and just some of the things that Mickey talked about yesterday. And I'll pass it over to Andy.
Yeah, so like you had mentioned, Henrich being out on the defense for the year is kind of a big blow to that defense. We saw that, for the Purdue game, those backup linebackers, the whole defense as an entity got thrashed by Purdue, but those backup linebackers kind of need to step up this week, and I'm sure Mickey and Bill Bush kind of told them that, Mickey's had that mentality of next man up, whether it's stepping up because a player's injured or because it's performance based that you need to step up and win the game on defense. But filling that hole is going to be pretty tough, especially when you have the nation's leading rusher coming into town this Saturday. So trying to stop him up the middle or on the edge is going to be important to have a stout linebacker. He didn't mention anything about Reimer being hurt or still day to day. So hopefully the bye week was a much needed rest for him to get healthy and get back out there, because the defense kind of hurts without Reimer out there right now. But then you also have Isaac Gifford to kind of fill that nickel role. So kind of getting one of those two backups to fill pretty big shoes that Henrich was out there for, whether you thought he played well or didn't play well at times. He was still kind of a more veteran presence out there on the defense in terms of linebackers. So tough loss for the defense, but overall, Mickey kind of just going straight ahead. It sucks that we lose him, but you got to keep thinking about this team and keep thinking forward, and we'll get the next guy up and ready to hopefully stop Chase Brown, but we'll talk about that later. So what Zach was kind of preluding to before with the Malachi Coleman commit was a couple of things that came out of that, those comments there. I'll start with the latter because it's easier to explain. He had mentioned in his press conference that, he said that Malachi didn't even plan to commit to Nebraska 6 to 7 months ago, which is a pretty damning thing to say about the previous coaching staff that was here. And that's just another tack on the things that Scott did wrong while he was here. Is if you had, especially an in-state recruit, an in-city recruit from Lincoln East telling us that, he didn't even plan to come to Nebraska because of the previous coaching staff. It's a pretty harsh reality to face, that if you can't even get an in-state recruit to stay at your school, it's kind of just tells the whole story of, what did Scott really do while recruiting here? How many potential big recruits did we miss out in the past 4.5 years because Scott had this sort of presence about trying to recruit to Nebraska, and that kids didn't want to come here because of the current coaching staff. So pretty harsh reality to face that. But, in the end, we got one of the better in-state recruits to come to Nebraska, and the big win for Mickey and the team. So the first part of that now is kind of the more quote unquote problematic portion, is the stupid NCAA rule about recruiting and what you can and can't say about recruits. So during the press conference, there was presumably a newer reporter that didn't really know this rule, and he had asked Mickey during the press conference, what did you think about the Malachi Coleman commit? Did you talk to him over the weekend, and so on and so forth? And a lot of like the veteran reporters in that room all kind of looked at each other because they know that they're not supposed to specifically name drop a recruit during a press conference to any sort of coach that is on the current staff. Um, and he had said it. Mickey had kind of repeated Malachi's name at his answer. And the reason that it's a really stupid rule is because you can't name drop or talk about a recruit in any sort of coaching position until that recruit has officially signed with your school. And the stupid part about it is Malachi can tweet out like on Twitter saying, "Oh, I've committed to Nebraska," and Mickey Joseph can go on his own personal Twitter account and retweet that tweet, or the Nebraska football account can retweet that saying, "Hey, we're happy that you like committed to this, like committed to our school," type thing. But Mickey can't go on a press conference and say like, "Yeah, I went and talked to Joe Smith in Texas this weekend, and he says he's going to commit to us," type thing. Mickey could say like, "Oh, I was in Austin, Texas this weekend, doing some recruiting," and the more veteran recruit reporters can kind of put the pieces together of who Mickey might have been seeing in Austin, Texas, or wherever he was recruiting. But he can't specifically say, "Oh, I talked to the so and so about trying to come commit to our school," or he can't say, "Yeah, I talked to Malachi and he committed to Nebraska," essentially. So it's a stupid rule, and it's a really stupid way you can get around of saying and like making that presence known that, "Oh yeah, we got this recruit to our school," but it's just so weird that you can't name drop a recruit until they have officially signed with your school. And who knows if he's going to get any sort of NCAA fine out of it. I'm sure if he does, it'll be a slap on the wrist fine. Or, those 5 days that Scott Frost was supposed to be suspended, and the NCAA will come back and be like, "Hey, we'll give this to you now, Mickey. You get to take those 5 days off of coaching practice now because Scott didn't get to do it." Type
I
thing.
think I think I read somewhere too, and I don't know if this is fully true. I think I just read that the reporter that asked him that question was a student reporter, and so
It yeah,
Mhm.
it's
Which
like
which is why I think he probably didn't know, which is why a lot like if you look at the press conference video, there's there's a lot of the older guys in the room just kind of all looked at each other like he wasn't supposed to say that type look to everybody else because they know the rules of like you can't name drop a recruit until they have signed with your school type thing. So it's a stupid rule and that's kind of my rant about it, but I mean I think they should change the rule going forward because like in the era of social media now, like that's how recruit like announce that they're committed to a school is it's all social media. They'll have big signing days, they'll have big like press conferences on ESPN now if you're like Alabama or Georgia or any one of those schools. But it's stupid that the head coach can't after a recruit commits he can't come out and say like, "Oh yeah, we got Malachi this weekend, like that's huge for our program going forward," type thing until they signed with the school. So all in all, I think that's kind of the quote unquote problematic thing that came out of the press conference. And who knows if Mickey will face any repercussions of it. I mean, it's such a stupid little fine if it does have to get fined for it. But that's all I got to say about the recruiting portion of that press conference debacle. So I'll pass it over to Nate there.
Yeah, so something probably about the founding fathers of the NCAA didn't have Twitter when they were coming up with the rule or something, I'm sure is how it'll
did we
come
confirm
down to
that?
it. But
I mean that we might need to go back and check that because that seems ridiculous.
but it did seem like reports after that said that Joseph talked with the school's compliance office right afterwards and was like, and even afterwards, he talked with a couple people in the athletic department and was like, "Did I do something wrong?" And so he's at least was acknowledging it, wasn't trying to hide it or anything, and so he is just kind of owning up to it. And so I imagine a slap on the wrist is probably all he'll get out of it, hopefully. But yeah, nonetheless, it's a little just frustrating thing in our relatively quiet bye week here. But
Stupid rule. Stupid rule. That's
yeah,
all.
yeah, can't argue with that. But otherwise, the big thing that I got out of the press conference is that he talked about recruiting offensive linemen out of junior colleges while they were out on the recruiting trail, which I think is an interesting setup. It could be certainly speculated that he's recruiting offensive line for next year for potentially his team. You could take that route, or you could just take the route of he's recruiting offensive line for next year just to better the program in general, whether it's him or whether it's someone else. It's either way, it's a good building block to move forward with, I think. And I thought it was really interesting to specifically name drop that. Yeah, we're going hard after the junior college guys. He did mention it was a little easier to go after junior college guys as well, compared to the transfer portal, because he mentioned that you can just go and talk to the coach at a junior college and be like, hey, what's this guy like? What is his background? How's he been playing? Things like that. Whereas with the transfer portal, you have to kind of talk to the high school coaches, and it gets a little weird that way. So I thought that was interesting.
I think, and yeah,
Yeah.
and I thought that was like good that he came out and said that, because we said last week that kind of one of our like hypothetical discussion points was, how do you fix the offensive line going forward? Because these guys still might be around for another year or two. And if this is what we have to deal with for another year or two, it's like, how do you go about fixing that? So it's good that he's kind of coming out and saying, like, yeah, we know the line's a problem. And it's easier to get guys that are 2 years into the system of being an offensive lineman, um, to come in and kind of help you with quick fixes until you can get recruits that you want in there developed and then get them out there. But it was nice to see that, he kind of didn't say that the offensive line was an issue, but acknowledging that, like, yeah, we know behind the scenes that we need to do more work because we know that it's an issue type thing.
I have absolutely zero proof, but I'm telling you guys, Mickey Joseph's an avid listener.
He knows what's up.
But those are kind of my big takeaways from the bye week press conference that Mickey held on Tuesday. But I'll go ahead and pass it over to Zach on any of his kind of closing thoughts there.
You bet. For me, you guys pretty much hit the nail on the head. I mean, Malachi Coleman being the pretty much the most exciting thing of the bye week. The most unexciting thing being that Henrich is out. But I think one of the things that I really liked that Mickey did touch on that obviously further proves that he listens to our podcast is the time of possession, and the fact that he even said, like, yeah, we need to get better about time of possession, but on the flip side, they still scored 37 points. So it's like, what do? Do you tell him? I think he specifically said in the presser that he was like, what do I, he's like, I can't tell him to not score for a minute. He's like, you just, you don't stop that when it happens. So I get it. And at the same time, time of possession did kill us, but we only lost by 6. So it's not like, I don't think time of possession was the entire factor of the game either. So, and obviously going back and rewatching the Purdue game just kind of solidified the idea that they just knew how to control the ball and were able to run consistent plays and get first downs and do dink and dunk plays, which I think we're going to see going forward is going to be how teams beat Nebraska. I mean, yes, we'll probably get beat on big plays too, but I think they're finding that now, especially with potentially, if Reimer's not back right away, but even then, we're going to be light in that area. They're going to definitely start probably throwing a lot of slants down the middle, and we'll see.
What I find kind of like almost growth of Mickey and kind of acknowledging what his team is if we remember after the Oklahoma game, he said, like, oh yeah, I realized, like, we have to slow the ball down. We have to kill clock and kill time. And we kind of saw that with Indiana, but now the past 2 games, he's kind of adjusted that. He's like, oh yeah, we can't do that with this offensive line. We know our offense is like a big play type thing. So like, like you said, Zach, like, he can't tell the offense not to score, but he also realizes, like, unless we get the run game going, we don't have the offense capable to run like a 40-minute game like Purdue did against us and run, 80 plus plays, because I get the idea that, like, that would be an ideal situation. That would be awesome to run that kind of offense. But now he's like, oh, now that we've, kind of 3 games into this after Oklahoma, when he said that, he's like, oh, our offense is now like big play or bust right now, at least. 5 more games left, so a lot can change in 5 games. It's a pretty tough 5 games coming up, but I think it was nice to see that he's acknowledged that at least.
For sure. And not only that, like, the other stuff that he touched on, I'm not going to say it's coach speak. It's not that, but he's noticing that, not only is there issues to fix with the team, but he also is saying like, we've got a game plan around this. So like if they double team Palmer, we have to get the other guys up there and, make the plays happen. So, I mean, he's obviously cognizant enough to notice like, oh, we need to game plan around these potential different things and make it to where we can still have our offense run and do the things they need to do without completely just focusing on one guy, that being Trey Palmer. And not only that, with the time of possession thing specifically too, like, I know Indiana's not necessarily the bar that we need to be like aiming for, but they're for how long, that's how they've run their offense. They do that up tempo, very quick, very quick offense. So, I mean, it's not impossible that it can't work, or it's not like impossible for it to work. It just, I don't know if we have the talent right now to do it. I think we do. I think we just need to put it all together and also get stops on defense. But regarding, that's pretty much the press conference. There wasn't a whole lot really to glean from it outside of the normal, we got to coach better. But I figure with that, we can move on to it's not a new segment, but we're going to start calling it a new segment now. Call it our community mailbag. We had quite a few different topics to discuss just around college football, and I guess really just football in general, that were submitted to us via Facebook. So going forward, for those that might be new listeners or don't follow us on social media, definitely check us out on Facebook and Twitter to get your opinions to us, because we like having stuff to talk about. A podcast really works well when you have stuff to talk about, it turns out. So we're just going to go kind of down the list here. And I actually think this is a really good one to start with, because we're getting into that part of the season where now we're seeing, who the teams really are. And so we'll start with college football predictions. And I will pass it to Andy to start us off.
So we'll narrow that down. So we'll talk about the playoff. Obviously, I think the playoff rankings come out either next weekend or the week after. I know their like committee show thing that they do every week is coming up pretty soon. But I mean, currently right now, I guess top 5, or I guess top 4, just based off the AP top 25, is Georgia, Ohio State, Tennessee, Michigan. If that were, obviously what it was set right now based off that would be your 4 in the playoff. Obviously, we know going forward that, Ohio State, Michigan will beat at the end of the year. More than likely unbeaten still, unless Nebraska walks into Ann Arbor and pulls up the ultimate trap game upset.
Stirs by 90.
But more than likely, the Ohio State Michigan game will go down to that game going to be the winner of the East, who will go to the conference championship. So one of those teams will have a loss. And whoever goes to the conference championship probably will win, because whoever comes out of the West, who knows who that'll be. Who knows if they'll even be good. But in terms of that, I mean, you could have an unbeaten Big Ten team and a one-loss Big Ten team. Tennessee, Alabama, probably will meet, because I think they're in opposite divisions in the SEC, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think they're in the same division. So I think they'll meet in the conference championship, assuming that they both win out the rest of the year. So that could be a rematch of the game that Tennessee just won a couple weeks ago. So, if Tennessee loses that game and Alabama wins, I mean, you could have that whole thing. Or, Georgia. Actually, I keep leaving Georgia because they're still undefeated at number 1 and everything as well.
And Georgia and
They play
Tennessee will meet in 2 weeks.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, so I mean, you got to throw that in too. So, a lot of these unbeaten teams right now may stay unbeaten. We may lose 2 of them. We probably will lose 2 of them. So you're still going to have 2 unbeaten teams, but, at the same time, unless Clemson runs the table, I mean, you're going to add that factor in is, if Clemson stays undefeated and wins the ACC, are you really going to keep an ACC team out of the playoff because you want to put in a 1-loss Big Ten team or a 1-loss SEC team? That's like Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, or Michigan, or Ohio State. I would find it tough to believe that they would leave out Clemson if they run the table and went out. They had a scare. It almost happened. Syracuse almost won. They were up 21-10. And then Clemson decided to be party poopers and not let Syracuse stay unbeaten and win. So whatever. We don't like Dabo for that reason, but
I don't think that's the only one, but we're not getting into that
no.
today.
TCU still unbeaten, so it remains to be seen. They haven't played Oklahoma or Oklahoma State yet, I believe. So that, I mean, not that Oklahoma's good either, but you
They
still have to play.
beat both actually.
Did they? Wow.
Yeah, and Kansas State last week. So.
TCU is on a tear.
TCU
this
might
year,
win the Big Ten
so-
then, or the Big 12. So I take back everything I just said. Yeah. So I mean, if TCU wins out, I mean, that's gonna be tough. I mean, it might be the first time that all 4 conferences get represented in a playoff. That would be really cool and really neat.
Sorry, Pac-12.
Yeah, the only way the Pac-12 is getting in is if Oregon wins out, and they hope that the committee is kind to let them in instead of another Big Ten or SEC team. Essentially, that I don't have much hope that the Pac-12 is getting in over another SEC or Big Ten team. And that's just because the playoff committee is going to be biased to the more bigger Power 5 conference, like the Big Ten or the SEC over the Pac-12, essentially. I mean, USC could also win, and the whole thing is just like messy right now until these teams actually play each other and we start to see 1-by-1 losses. But TCU really does interest me because, I mean, if they run the table and win out and win the Big 10 or Big 12 conference, if they get the 4 seed, I mean, obviously they'll probably play Georgia more than likely, but it's one of those things of, how the Big 12 is going to fare in the playoff against the SEC or Big 10. And I'm assuming that like Michigan and Ohio State will come down to their last game and one of them is going to win the conference championship and stay undefeated. Obviously crazier things have happened. It's college football. But I mean, right now, I mean, that's a pretty good. I don't think I would change anything just because I think Michigan is better than Clemson. So I would put Michigan in over Clemson right now. Just based off everything. I mean, yeah, Clemson's undefeated, but I mean, they won in overtime to Wake and they almost lost to Syracuse. I don't think Michigan's had a close scare all year.
Michigan
I mean, the first
just looks like the more complete team overall.
Yeah,
Like
they had the first half against Penn State, but then they came out and kicked their butts. So, I mean, that's the top 4 I would go with. It's just how it is right now because I think that is your 4 best teams in college football right now. Obviously, as we get closer to conference championship weekend, we'll find out more once teams start losing and who looks to be better. But I mean, if this is a year you want Bama to not be included, then you have to root for the Pac-12 and the Pac-10 or Pac-12 essentially to keep winning and get Alabama out of there. But I'm afraid the football committee might still favor Bama if they win out and are a 1-loss team trying to get in at the 4 seed type thing. Obviously, this whole discussion will be different in a couple of years when we have 12 teams to discuss instead of 4.
I can't wait.
I know.
It's gonna be so nice.
Then we'll be arguing about the 12 seed.
That's fine. I would much rather have an argument about that because that I feel like really opens up a type of discussion you can have. Whereas 4 just is like, oh, there they are,
But yeah, that's kind of just looking at the top 10, the kind of college football picture at the moment. That's just my views on it. I don't know if you guys want to touch on any of that or if you want to touch on any other teams in particular that have kind of striked you so far this season.
I don't have too much, I guess. I think you have your top 5 or 6 that are pretty well solidified, still undefeated. I'll just get into my predictions, I guess, for who I think the top 4 will end up being. I think from what I've seen, Ohio State looks like the better team, so I think they'll probably win out against Michigan. I also think they're probably going to come in a little fired up about last year's game, and I think that'll be just even more motivation for their revenge tour, I suppose. So I think Ohio State will be making it in unless Nebraska wins out the Big Ten West and makes it to the championship. Then obviously Ohio State won't be undefeated after the Big Ten championship. But past that, I'm going to go with Ohio State making it in. I think it's a tough one between Tennessee and Georgia because that'll be an interesting matchup in a couple weeks when they get together. Is that Not sure who has the home game. Looks like it is at Georgia. So that'll add a little bit of flavor to that game. But
I hope Tennessee wins and takes their goalposts and brings them back all the way to Knoxville. Like, here you go. Here's your goalposts back.
Just for that, I'll pick Tennessee out of that one. You hear that, Tennessee? If you take their goalposts, you gotta.
You got my vote for the rest of the year.
Yeah. So
This
again,
needs to
Ohio
happen
State, Tennessee. I think Clemson's gonna win out, and then I would love to see TCU in there. I'm just not certain that they'll be able to win out because they'll still have to win the Big 12 championship against probably a rejuvenated Oklahoma or maybe a Oklahoma State. It's tough to beat a team 2 times, tough to beat a team 3 times. So I think TCU, unfortunately, we left out. Even if they do run the table, I have a hard time seeing the committee keeping Alabama out. So I think my top 4 will be Ohio State, Tennessee, Clemson, Bama.
Okay,
That's kind of my prediction. I'll let you guys.
Where's Nebraska?
Not anywhere near the top 4.
Like I said, that's the only hope for knocking Ohio State out of the contention is if Nebraska can make the Big Ten championship. So we'll see. But
Yeah, this is tough because the college football playoff has shown in years past that they say they're not biased, and I don't know if bias is the correct word, but they've shown that generally speaking, they've got the teams that they think are the best, and which is why we have the complaints about why the college football playoff right now is boring, or not boring, but just seems like there's no real. It's never really different, you know. It begs the question: why do we get rid of the bowl game system if we were just going to keep choosing the same top 4 anyway? But this year, I think finally gives us a lot of different different looks. I'm just kind of looking through the top 4, 5, 6 myself, and you can make an argument. Well, I mean, if we go all the way down to 7, I feel like TCU could make an argument, provided they keep going on their tear. But I don't know if they're gonna have a good enough strength of schedule. Well, I don't know. They've had a pretty good schedule already. Just looking back on it. But I mean, to finish out the year, though, they're also not necessarily going to be playing the toughest teams either. So I don't know
I
if
feel like
TCU is going to get on
Texas
there.
and Baylor might give them. I mean, Texas Tech has shown that they can be good. I feel like those last 3 games outside of Iowa State might be tough for them. I mean, they're not ranked currently, but I mean, you still have to beat Texas Tech, Texas, and Baylor, who were all ranked at one point this season too. So
That's true, but I think that's what I mean is like if we're looking at overall strength of schedule and how even their rankings fluctuated, that Texas is not the same team it was 3 weeks ago.
no, definitely not when they played
Baylor.
Alabama.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like obviously, like I said, teams are kind of coming into who they really are now in the middle of the season. Ohio State actually, I think is going to be the better team. I think they'll win out over Michigan. I agree with Tennessee. I don't know what's in the water down there this year, but it's obviously working for them. So
some good old Rocky Top magic,
and I'm here for it. Clemson, yeah. So who did you say, Nate? Ohio State, Tennessee, Clemson, and Bama.
Yep.
Okay. Well,
I mean, it would be tough for the committee to leave out Clemson if they run the table.
Yeah, that's true. But
Even
Clemson just
TCU.
hasn't. Clemson hasn't looked nearly the same as they always have either, and which is why I'm so hesitant to put them on there.
They've had more close games, more scares than Tennessee has, or who am I thinking of? Michigan, yeah, or Ohio State even.
Let's see. I don't know. It's tough because I think I hope Tennessee beats Georgia because then that's the clear consensus for who's the better team. But I don't know. My gut's telling me it's probably not going to happen. So just to be different, I guess, just because I like to be different, I'm going to go with Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson, and Bama. I think those are going to be the 4. And we're going to see, like I said, probably another woo college football playoff. I mean, I'm okay with Ohio State because they're Big Ten, but I mean, everybody else in that list is like, yay, cool. It's the same thing we've had, outside of maybe one outlier, which is why I'm really hoping that Tennessee becomes the outlier. But I don't know. I got to be different, obviously. So, I guess, is there anything else we wanted to touch on with college football playoffs for us, or we want to keep
Not
moving
college
on?
football, because I want to get to a quick whip around the NFL, because we're still talking about football. So why don't we talk about the NFL while we're at it?
All right. Well,
I
mean,
missed making fun of the NFC Beast when they were bad. I hate that they're all good now. And now the NFC Beast actually means something instead of me just making a joke about it.
it's funny too because
Unless you're the Commanders.
I'm for people that know me, I'm an Eagles fan, and I'm absolutely excited that they're 6-0 and the only undefeated team in the NFL. But of course, as soon as that happens, then the rest of the NFC East has to, actually make up the rest of the beast there. The Commanders are what they are, but I admittedly don't think that's really a Ron Rivera or even a Carson Wentz issue. I think that's a Dan Snyder issue, but
Yeah,
that's a whole different topic that I don't know if I want to talk about.
Yeah, that's a whole other 20-minute vent we can get into because that's a whole situation in and of itself.
Which is even funnier because they beat the Packers this last weekend, and there were still chance to sell the team. Which, I mean, I get it. Like, I totally understand.
There will be until Schneider's not in charge
there
anymore.
should be. Yep.
But it's so funny to me because, like, Dan Snyder has even made himself even more of a villain because he came out and said that he's got dirt on all the other, like, not all of them, but a bunch of NFL owners. And it's just like, dude, what are you doing? He basically is making himself untouchable, and it's really unfortunate because even though I'm not a Commanders fan, like, it's got to suck being a fan of a team that just has a terrible owner.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I still think, though, even though that game was hilarious just to watch the Packers lose, I still think my favorite game I still think the game that absolutely took it for me was the Panthers-Bucks game. Tom Brady down, baby. By the Panthers.
Walker.
That whole situation, I mean, I know for some of our listeners that don't like Tom Brady, that's like fun I mean, I guess if you hate Tom Brady, it's fun to watch this, but like it is so baffling how he has been like awful this year. Like it really shows that like Father Time will always win because he does not look the same. And Aaron Rodgers is starting to teeter on that a little bit. I still think Rodgers still has a little bit more care and passion and get up to him than Brady. But like Brady just does not look like he cares about football at all anymore. Yet he's still doing it.
In Rodgers' defense, he doesn't have anybody to pass to. Either,
I know, which is like
I think the Buccaneers don't have an offensive line either. I'm pretty sure like 3 or 4 of the starters got injured.
Right, and they got like that. Their starting center before the season even started was probably their biggest blow because he was like the best veteran for their line. But like, I mean, Brady just does not look good at all. And I know, obviously, like we've all heard about his off-field issues with this marriage and everything, and that's neither here nor there to discuss about that. But
you can't say it doesn't affect a guy.
It definitely it's
like,
showing
it
that it affects him.
Yeah, like not only that, isn't like the Tom Brady special. And I mean, I don't have a problem with Tom Brady, from a football standpoint. I respect. I don't like watching teams play against him, at least in the past, because obviously he respect to the guy. He's he has made himself, he's the GOAT of the NFL. Like no way you can question that. However, he is definitely easy to root against because he's so good. But like, isn't the Tom Brady special like doing the quick slants, the quick, I mean, he has some big plays here and there, but hasn't it always been, run the quick offensive? Basically what Nebraska has to do is just, get the ball out fast. Yeah. And it's like, I guess it's just funny to me that, it shows that even with that, he still doesn't look the same. He should have stayed retired. I mean, he should have just stayed retired.
And I mean, they lost to a team that fired their head coach, is playing with like their second or third string quarterback, and just traded away their, their franchise running back.
Yep.
And they made the Panthers look like one of the best teams on Sunday. It was baffling, like how bad that game was.
It was beautiful.
It was great.
Give the Panthers credit in the entire world. They had absolutely no business of being in this season the rest of the year, and yet they're going out playing. I mean, I feel bad for their players because like that's just there's nothing you could do in that situation. I mean, everything's in shambles, and yet they came out and they kicked their butts on Sunday.
Gotta be a good like confidence booster though.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's funny too because we were all talking about this on I think it was either Saturday or Sunday. The Huskers had a bye week. I'm an Eagles fan. They had a bye week.
This is going to come out to mixed reviews, but the other bye week team is the Minnesota Vikings.
And so me and Nate, the two teams that we cheer for, had a bye week.
Yep.
And so then that left Andy, who a Broncos fan over there.
I don't want to talk about it.
Poor guy.
Football sucks. Everything
Oh
sucks.
man. It's the NFL is a completely different beast, and it's the gift that can give or can take away at any moment.
Mhm.
You want to talk about a way to kill the joy on a Sunday? That's the absolute way to do it.
It takes away a lot of joy. I didn't expect the Broncos to win the division, but I also didn't expect them to be this bad at all.
It's so
cooked.
Yeah, I think he is. It's so crazy too because didn't you say? I mean, we didn't talk about this on the podcast, but I think Andy, you mentioned that Denver is listed as like one of the top, if not the top defenses.
They're like top
in the
5 in the
NFL.
league, and then they're like bottom 2 in the league on offense.
Turns out that that's not a great mix.
They have scored 100 total points in 7 games. Compare that. I mean, obviously the Chiefs score a lot, but I mean the Chiefs have scored 223 points. I think Denver's averaging under 15 points a game.
Man,
15. That's barely 2 touchdowns.
Hackett needs to stop calling plays.
I'm not going to go on a rant because we could be here a lot longer.
That's a whole other podcast.
We could be here a lot longer than we need to be.
Once we get good at this podcast, we'll start one next year.
Right. But back to the overall NFL. I mean, you talk about kind of your top contenders, obviously the Eagles, Vikings out of the NFC. I mean, the Giants, Danny Dimes coming out of nowhere and doing what he does. But I mean, outside of those teams, I mean, I don't really have a whole lot for the NFC of who is going to come out on top to go to the Super Bowl, because that's just kind of, it's not like in the AFC where you have the Bills, the Chiefs, the Jets somehow, the Ravens, as your probably top teams that are going to be one of those 3 for sure is going to be in the Super Bowl between the Chiefs, Bills, and the Ravens.
Unless the Bengals have some more magic.
Or unless the Bengals are starting to get hot, so they're starting to creep up there. They started a little slow, but if they do what they did Sunday, they'll probably be up there again. But I mean, yeah, if you look at the NFC, I just don't have a good feel on who objectively, outside of if you take away obviously your guys' team bias, objectively, I don't know who I expect to come out of that to go to the Super Bowl.
I mean, obviously I'm biased, but
right.
Objectively speaking, the Eagles have just looked good in every game they've
right.
played.
And if I had to bet money, I would kind of lean towards them right now, just because their defense is a lot better than I expected them to be. Yes. I mean, I knew their offense would be better compared to last year, but I'm I think the thing that'll hinder them is the defense.
And the other big question mark for the Eagles was Jalen Hurts, and he has had a phenomenal season. I think people expected him to get better. I don't think people expected him to get that much better.
Right.
That was nuts.
That's kind of what I saw with the Vikings. I thought, the Vikings can be good if they have an offensive line.
Mhm.
Like, as much as I love to make fun of Pizza Ranch Man and Kirk, I also acknowledge that the Vikings have a lot of weapons. They just
yeah.
never get the ball to because Kirk has no time to do anything.
I think the obvious outlier to me in terms of top teams, since I'm just looking at the rankings here, is the Giants. And I'm not saying that
Dude,
I
I don't even know.
I understand my bias is saying, oh, the Giants suck, but they don't, first of all.
I
But if you look
I
at
don't
their,
even know how they've done what they've done.
Mhm.
I truly do not.
Brian Dabble is
he's a hell of a coach. Oh, hey, look at that. I like, and I don't want to be like that guy, the homer, obviously, because of the Eagles bias I have. But like, you go back and look at some of their games. Like I was watching the end of the Jags Giants game, and
Mhm.
the Jags almost came back. They were like on the 4-yard line to almost score
Mhm.
a touchdown to potentially win the game. It might not have been that close, but
Mhm.
regardless, like you look at the last few games, and the Giants have basically scraped by, which is actually incredible because their team is pretty like down in terms of like who they thought talent was.
Right.
And so, I mean, credit to them because they're also making a heck of a case. And obviously, like as much as I cannot stand Dallas, they could
Mhm.
make a heck of a run at the end of the year too here.
Mhm.
So, it's going to be the NFC. Ironically enough, is going to be it's going to be a strong conference for a few teams. It's not going to be like the AFC where we could see quite a few different movements in the rest of the year. I still think the Bills take the AFC
Oh
personally.
yeah.
I think
They're
the Bills
scary revenge tour.
the Bills handled the Chiefs in that game.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like
I
even as an
kinda-
Eagles fan, the Bills are clear number one.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious about San Francisco. Obviously, Trey getting hurt at the beginning of the year probably wasn't their best thing. Good thing they kept Jimmy G, depending on how you look at that. But now you get Christian McCaffrey. I mean, that offense already has Ayuk and obviously has Debo, has Kittle. And now you
Top
add
10 defense, right?
Yeah, and I mean their defense is good too. It's just their offensive play it's just not been good. And how much would that change if Trey was in and still healthy versus having to settle for Jimmy G the rest of the year. So I'm kind of curious to see. I mean that their division too with Seattle. I mean, yeah, Seattle, LA, and the Cardinals. I mean, Seattle's ahead at 4-3, and everybody else is either 3-3 or 3-4. So I don't know who will come out of the NFC West. I mean, that's just it might be what the NFC East was last year. It's just they're all going to stay at those same like within a game of each other the rest of the year type thing. But they're like a team I'm watching for in the NFC just to see how they do the rest of the year because I mean if they can get their offense going, they're pretty scary in terms of like their defense and they can. I mean they obviously showed it last year, beating Green Bay at home. In the playoffs. So, I mean, they have that mentality, and Kyle Shanahan has that coaching experience of like, yeah, we're not afraid to be an underdog in any sort of game. So they're just a team, and outside of obviously your guys' team of who I'm curious of how they do the rest of the year. The Rams, I mean, reigning Super Bowl champs, not having a great start to the year, but they could also pick up steam midseason and kind of what the Bengals are doing right now is, maybe just take some time to figure things out. Maybe they get rolling again. So that's kind of a couple of the teams out of the NFC that I'm curious about watching as well.
Yeah. I mean, we could go on and on about the NFL, but I figure, we got kind of a good base covered there, I think. So going back to, Husker related stuff or college football related stuff, one of the questions we got, has Trey Palmer overcome Anthony Grant for team MVP? And I'll just put the definitive answer here. Yes.
Yes.
That's not necessarily Grant's.
Yeah,
that's not Grant's fault. In order for him to have become the MVP, that requires an O-line. And even though we had a bye week, I figure since we're on this topic, on this week's episode of Fire Them into the Sun, we're gonna stick with
still the
O-line.
offensive line.
Yep, offensive line, hands down.
I think the offensive
didn't even
line
see him
has
practice.
Sorry guys, it's just that's how it has to be.
Until
Someone
they
has to get
prove
fired
that they
into the
don't
sun.
deserve to be fired into the sun, we're gonna keep firing them into the sun.
So, but yeah, I think without a doubt, Trey Palmer Trey Palmer is I think he's not only the MVP of Nebraska, he's like he's the top receiver in the Big Ten, isn't he? Or
Yep.
he was.
And the
I don't know if he
nation,
still is. Yeah, and you know,
at least yards
obviously,
wise.
yeah. So I think it would be, I don't want to say foolish, but it would be crazy to not consider him the MVP, especially with the game he had against Purdue. He is the reason that we stayed. I mean, he's one of the short list of reasons we stayed in that game, by far. But that was an easy topic. I like that.
I think if we want to touch on next year's schedule before we dive into kind of Illinois,
I was
real
going to
quick.
do the quick shout out to Cody that I went to college with on some thoughts on Malachi Coleman's comments about Mickey Joseph being the deciding factor. I think that is definitely a very good start for Mickey, at least getting the head coaching vacancy. I mean, it definitely doesn't hurt Mickey at all going forward.
Mhm.
You know, it it was definitely surprising to hear Malachi just come out and say, "Yeah, no, 6 months ago I wasn't going to be here," and then Mickey also just kind of name dropping that comment in his press conference, being like, "Yeah, 6 months ago he wasn't coming here. You guys put the pieces together." I mean, that's a pretty.
I think this
that's a pretty good
actually,
mic drop there for you.
I think that actually opens up a good discussion point that I kind of want to bring up, and this is kind of three parts. So Malachi Coleman has basically said that, because he didn't say this out loud, but putting the pieces together, because Mickey is the head coach, or he's at least going to be retained in some way, that's why he committed here. Okay. And then on top of that, we also saw here this last week that Priscilla, Mickey Joseph's wife, odd by the way that she was the one doing this, but she gave an interview to somebody. I didn't catch the YouTube video or anything, but she was giving an interview talking about like his 10 years so far and everything, and what it's like being being a head coach's wife, in this scenario. Those two things, on top of just some of the other stuff that's happened here in the past, like with the clause, I think that has been confirmed that Mickey gets retained. Well, confirmed that he gets retained for the next coaching staff. Just like outside of it's not obvious, but it seems like Mickey Joseph right now is the front runner. And on top of that, I'm curious to see, like, now that we were into the season a bit more, we talked we talked for a long time after Scott Frost got fired, like who's like your top head coach candidates. And I remember saying Bill O'Brien. Okay, fire him into the sun. No, thank you. I don't want him anymore. But people
Called it.
I think the ones that we for sure landed on being good options that we liked were like Dave Aranda, Lance Leopold, Mickey Joseph's on that list. And I think really for me, those were the three.
Nate doesn't agree with me on this, but Lane Kiffin has climbed up my list a little bit.
Oh, right. I guess I forgot about Kiffin. And I would argue that'd be a good get too. So I'm curious.
I know Nate doesn't want him, but it's fine. It's whatever.
So I guess
Nate doesn't want a recently lost coach that was undefeated until LSU on our team, but it's fine.
My reasons.
So outside of maybe like Kiffin and some of the obvious ones that we could probably spend the money to get them, but we would probably never get them, being like Saban and people like that,
Fickle.
and I don't know.
Fickle is still in my top 5 for sure.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. I just don't know if he's gonna leave, but hey, so I mean, with those guys, I'm curious because a lot of people keep pointing that Mickey Joseph doesn't have any head coaching experience, and I mean, I agree, I get it, and we're kind of at the point now where I think we want that proven head coach experience to come in and know how to run the program, however they want to run it, but they know what they're going to do. They have a plan for it. But I don't really see anything that is completely tipping me off against Mickey in that case, though. Again, like Kiffin, I think Kiffin is really the outlier here. I think I honestly do think he'd be a great get, even though he does have some drama surrounding him in certain cases. He's a good recruiter, obviously a pretty good coach. I mean, outside of, some of that other stuff, he'd be fine. But like if we take him out of the equation and look at our other ones that have been constantly spotted and constantly talked about, like Lance Leopold from Kansas and Dave Aranda, specifically Aranda, because he's got ties to Bush and Joseph. I don't know. Like, I guess my question is Mickey making an argument as a front runner for the head coach for you guys? Because I personally think he is. I don't know if he's necessarily top one, but he's definitely top three for sure for me.
Yeah, I know I talked about this with Nate before we hopped on. It's one of those situations like I'm still waiting till like the end of the season to the end of November to actually like obviously we'll hear a decision on whether I'm confident in my pick that I internally have, but it's one of those to where it's kind of where you had this same situation with Scott where at the time like you have your really hot candidates, and if you don't get that certain coach and he goes on somewhere else and does better things, are you going to sit here and have FOMO and be like, oh man, we missed on another great guy? It's kind of the same thing with Mickey. Is if you don't hire Mickey and you hire an outside candidate and Mickey goes on and gets hired somewhere else and starts doing well and does really well, and you're like, oh man, we missed, like he could have been here doing this. And same thought applies vice versa. Is if you get an outside, like if you keep Mickey, but an outside candidate that you wanted or Trev thought he should have hired does really well somewhere else, and you're like, oh man, we could have got that guy to come here instead. We kept Mickey, and Mickey could still do well and be here well, and that thought couldn't even cross your mind. But if he's kind of mediocre, or you kind of have this same downward spiral where we're just not good anymore, and somebody else that you wanted to hire does well, then you're in the same situation of having FOMO, and it's just one of those situations where like, yeah, you just have to gamble and hope that it works out. But it's so hard for me to truly like want it's so hard because like obviously I want Nebraska to win. I want us to do well. But at the same time, I'm glad I'm not Trev, because the more you win, the harder it is will be for Trev to block out the noise of, yeah, you have to hire Mickey now, regardless of who else Trev has already slotted or who he's talked to, of like, yeah, this is the guy I want if it's not Mickey type thing. Um, and obviously, we saw with Scott's metrics of like, Scott only had to get to 6 wins to pretty much keep his job, and he couldn't even do that. So that's kind of like how far this program has fallen. It's like 6 wins is the bare minimum, like is the minimum, is the bar for this program, to where like Ohio State is. I think they like talked with Ryan Day last week, is like, yeah, you expect to not lose a single game at Ohio State. Like that is where their program bar is. And that's where Nebraska was. And now you sit here and like, man, this bar for this program is, I hope you make it to a bowl game type thing. And it's just, for me, I don't have, yeah, I'm not going to make my decision until the end of the season of who I think should be the coach or who I want as the coach, because I just don't know. I still am on the fence of, I love Mickey, like you said, Zach. I mean, I hope like if he is the coach that like obviously things go well, but at the same time, and like I've said all before, Trev and this program are not in a position to make a gamble higher on somebody without head coaching experience. We have been in this place for 20 plus years, and Trev knows like you have to make the correct hire. You do not have to get the splash sexy hire like Scott was, because that's what like at the time, who knows if we didn't hire Scott, if he would have stayed there for another year and then went somewhere else, and that we have kind of the same conversation of, oh man, we missed out on him. But if you're Trev, you do not have to make a super sexy hire. I do not think that is the right move. I don't know if I am totally comfortable and confident in somebody that has not had a proven track record at this time. Not saying that I couldn't warm up to the idea of Mickey. Obviously, I'd love, I'll support if Mickey is the head coach, but I am still teetering right now on somebody with head coaching experience at a Power 5 level, because that this like Nebraska is a laughing stock of the college football world right now. And, it's going to take years to crawl out of that. But I mean, you have to start somewhere, and you have to start somewhere with somebody that has experience, that has proven to get you out of these holes and get the program back to where it needs to be. And I mean, unless Mickey, obviously, this whole head coaching term has been an interview for him. So obviously, he can still sway my mind if we do well, we win some of these games, and we somehow miraculously win 3 more games to get to a bowl. Obviously, my mind will be swung and be like, okay, we're ready to give him a chance. But at the same time, are we prepared to offer somebody a 3 to 4 year contract that is a very first head coach when we need to win now type thing? I don't know very many coaches that'll accept a 1 or 2 year contract to maybe not be there after year 2 or something like that. So that's something that Trev has to also look at and be like, is this a long term commitment that we're willing to gamble and risk? And are we going to be in the situation again in 3 to 4 years where we're having to look for another head coach because we could barely get 6 wins again type thing? But that's kind of my thoughts on it. I mean, I have my own top candidates and everything, but I just right now, Mickey can sway me and win games, and I'll be like, okay, I'll be on board. But I think right now the program just needs somebody that can stabilize and win and help us get out of this hole, because it would be nice to finally start being the team that, other teams look at and be like, oh crap, we have to play Nebraska this week. Like, they're scared for us to come in their house, and they're scared to come to our house type games. I mean, right now we are like obviously the Rutgers, the Northwesterns of the Big Ten, like teams that look at us and be like, oh yeah, we don't have to ever worry about them type team. It's one of those. I hate it. Obviously, we hate it as Nebraska fans, but that's just it's the modern age of college football right now. And I think obviously Trev knows that he is in a position that he has to make the correct hire, and that's why I'm glad I'm not making it, and that he has to do it. But I'll pass it to Nate. With that, he make it could sway me, but right now I think we have to lean towards somebody that can prove that they can win at a Power 5 level.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be an interesting decision that Trev is going to have a really difficult time making. It also kind of, in my mind, or the back of my mind, just bears wondering if Mickey gets passed over for the head coach job, does he want to stay? Like, even if it is a Dave Aranda or something, does he want to stay on as just an assistant coach after he's gotten a taste of some head coaching experience? And I mean, I wouldn't blame him if he wanted to try his hand at a head coaching position elsewhere. I mean, he's already proven that he can recruit well and can get a locker room behind him. So I mean,
and who knows,
he's
like
got
even
positive things going
if
for him.
the coaching staff that comes in, if they'll even keep him type thing,
Mhm.
because I mean they ultimately have the say of who they want on their staff as well.
Yep.
So they could clean house, or they could keep him, but obviously like no guarantees that Mickey might not be there more than a year type thing. And I think that's what happened when Callahan, I believe, got hired. Is they kept Turner Gill on from Solich's staff. That's kind of you're going to be here for a little bit because you have some sort of tie to this program. We just need you here to kind of help us with the ropes, and then you'll be shipped out type thing. I don't know if that's necessarily the correct idea to approach that. It's I get the idea in theory of like, oh, you want somebody that kind of knows to help with the Nebraska program to stay here and help the new coaching staff for a little bit until they get accommodated, and then they're out of their way. Obviously, that didn't work out for Turner Gill, but it's one of those to where does the same thing happen with Mickey? Does he even want to do that? It's like you said, Nate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but then I think, I don't know, on the other hand, you've also got clearly recruits are buying in. Malachi Coleman committed out of seemingly nowhere, essentially, out of not wanting to come here. And so that's obviously we're getting the job done there. He's got the support of the locker room, clearly. Kids are really buying into Mickey and what this program means to him. And so it's definitely going to be a tough decision for Trev to make. And
And he said
I
that during
just hope.
the press conference is like Mickey is selling the brand of Nebraska, whether
Mhm.
he is here or there. Like whether I'm here next year or not, I'm selling the brand of Nebraska to these players, which is absolutely the way you should go about that. Obviously, you want to sell yourself as a coach too, because you're the ones that are coaching these kids and that they're going to be seeing daily. But you also want to sell the idea and the brand of Nebraska, like, hey, this is what we have to offer you, whether we're here or not. You're still going to have these things in place because this is what Nebraska is.
Mhm. And just regardless of anything, whether he's selling himself or Nebraska, it seems like he's doing the right things to get kids to want to come here and just buy into the program at large. So that's definitely I don't know, it's going to be a tough decision, but like you said, Andy, I'm glad I don't have to make it.
I'm glad we are not the adults making
And,
it.
yep. Hopefully the rest of the interview for Mickey goes stunningly. So
Fine
I
then.
guess that'll be
I'll
my
I'll keep drinking the Kool-Aid. I am personally on the Mickey train. I mean, I don't, like I said, I don't know if he's my top one, but if he does become the head coach, I think I'll be excited because
Mhm.
I really like his attitude. I really like how he takes uh, accountability almost to a degree, almost to a fault, because he's like, yeah, that's on me after the Purdue game and stuff. And it's like, not everything's on you. Like sometimes the players just didn't do their job. And I'm not
Mhm.
saying like, but that's the thing, is he is going out of his way to make sure he doesn't blame the players. And I still say, I know that we haven't really won really any big games that makes me say, oh, he should definitely be the de facto guy. But we were not supposed to even be close to Purdue. We beat
Mhm.
Indiana and Rutgers. And again, I understand that these aren't barn burning teams, but uh, after Oklahoma and that bye week, I still say that we've seen a different Nebraska team than previous years. And Mickey being a head coach just for 4 to 5 weeks or whatever we're at now has obviously turned that around. So I think the big question mark for me is, if he does become the head coach, which today's head coaches in football are a lot more CEO type, where they're just delegating tasks and game
Mhm.
management, and I like that. And I think Mickey has shown he can be a game manager. He needs to work on it, but nobody's perfect either.
Right.
Look at Andy Reid in the NFL. He still doesn't understand game management. He's got a Super Bowl. I think he's fine.
He's very bad at clock management.
I think he's
Surprisingly.
okay. I mean, granted, it helps that he has probably one of the best.
He's gotten a lot
Uh,
better, but there was
he's
that
got one of the
time where
best.
like you would go onto social media and be like, "Oh, Andy Reid doing his typical clock management mishaps again." That was a fun time.
Oh yeah, but I mean, Mickey's also shown that he's willing to improve, and I don't necessarily want to keep beating the door down against Scott Frost. His time's over here. We don't need to keep talking about him. But compared to Scott, the one thing that I can say Mickey has done that he's shown me, and the reason that I'm behind him on this, is because he's shown that he's willing to make the changes. If something's
Mhm.
not working, he's the one that came up and said he fired Shenander. Like that was his
Mhm.
decision. I think Trev even said that too. He's like, that was Mickey's decision. That was not mine. I mean, and I think all of the state of Nebraska agreed with it. And I mean, with that too, Bill Bush is making an argument that, if Mickey does stay head coach, that he could stay as well. I wouldn't be upset about that.
Right.
Mark Whipple, I'm on the fence about him, but I think he could make an argument for staying. But I mean, anyway, we obviously don't know, and there's still a lot of season left. But I mean, outside of maybe Fickle and Kiffin, I think he actually, there you go. I think to me it'd go Fickle, Kiffin, Mickey, and in not necessarily like there's not like miles between that ranking either. They're very close to me. Um,
I think
but
a lot of my perspective too is we are so focused as a program of, oh, you have to get somebody with Nebraska ties in here. I mean, do we necessarily have to? I mean, I know Kiffin technically does because he was born here, but he also has never been involved in the program. So it's like, do you really need somebody that's been involved with the program before? Versus like, do you really need just a new fresh face that's never been here before? I mean, Saban's never been at Alabama before he took the head coaching job, and obviously that worked out. Now, comparing anybody to Saban is an outlier because that's never, that he's just such an outlier to everybody else. But you know, do we want to settle for somebody that has like you're settling for a coach because he has Nebraska ties. I mean, that's not the way to approach it. So as you also look at it is, do you need just somebody with a fresh set of eyes outside of this program that's never been here before to look at things and be like, okay, I'm at Nebraska now. I don't know anything about this, but this is how I do things. And this is how we're going to do it here type thing. Versus, this is always how it's been done at Nebraska, that we're going to keep doing it the same way. I'm like, that's not always the case. Obviously, it didn't work out with Scott, but you don't necessarily need to hire somebody with Nebraska ties. Now, Mike Riley's such an oddball. I don't even want to talk about that, but he was also the last winning coach at Nebraska, so
What a
it's also
great
something
guy,
to talk
though.
about, though. I know, he's such a nice guy. His
He
press
was a nice
conferences were so
guy.
much
Yeah.
fun. He always had his Pepsi with him at his press conferences. He was such a fun guy.
If you want to talk about outliers, though, Andy, just on the other side
Mhm.
on the defense of Mickey, and I know we talked about him earlier, but you want a really good outlier, as much as I can't stand the guy, Dabo at Clemson. He
I
wasn't a
know.
head coach beforehand.
I
He was
know.
he was pretty much exactly the same way as Mickey was too. He
I
came from
know,
being
and that's the hope that Trev wants. Is like, can you find that diamond in a rough assistant coach that can be a Dabo Sweetie? But also, you look at his Dabo Sweetie as a one in a kind diamond that you're gonna find in a rough, like in a pile of coal too, at the same time. So, I mean, obviously, every program would love to have that happen to him, but you also look
Yeah.
at it as like Dabo is a one of the kind assistant elevated to head coach that wins you a national championship type thing. So, if Mickey's that guy and we're right about it, obviously we'll love it. But at the same time, like I said before, you might have FOMO if you hire somebody else and then Mickey does become that guy somewhere else. So it's just all hypotheticals we love to talk about. And, nothing happens until it happens type thing.
Well, it doesn't matter who we get here. It's going to be a gamble regardless
Mhm.
because, even if it is Dave Aranda, even if it is Fickle, even if it is Kiffin, they're going to have to change what they're doing. Their mentality around recruiting is going to have to change because Nebraska hasn't been good for a while, and it's not easy to recruit at Nebraska compared to Ole Miss or I guess I don't know about Cincinnati, but obviously he's doing something right there. So, but I mean, I think I think he's making a really good argument for himself, and I mean, I understand. I'm really good about getting way ahead of myself and then reeling it back afterwards. But I don't know. I think there's just a lot of really good intangibles that Mickey has that go along with being a head coach that I think he would be successful here.
Right.
Might not be that on top of the transfer portal and like the JUCO stuff and all that.
Mhm.
That success could come quicker, and that goes for any coach that comes here. But I mean, the transfer portal talk could be its own episode because of that. And I think we all have varying degrees of how much we like or dislike the transfer portal, but that is what it is. So I think
Let's
we can
overreact
get
to 2023 real quick.
yes.
12. We're all in
Oh, yeah.
agreement. 12-0, right? All right, we can move on.
Yep, that's
All
what I
right,
saw.
cool. All right, moving on to Illinois. No, actually, I think what we're all in agreement with is a Thursday night opener. Who decided that was a good idea?
That's the Big Ten saying here you're obligated to fulfill your TV contract because we have so many networks now. So this is what you get.
Fire Kevin Warren into the sun now.
Oh wait! I can change this. So it's not the O-line anymore. Although unfortunately, Kevin Warren doesn't necessarily work for Nebraska.
I was gonna say Kevin Warren he'll be the first one on top of the list for 2023 when we get to next year's.
I hate that. Thursday night opening game. That sucks, dude.
Yeah, it's gonna, especially when that's an oddity in itself. But you also look at the fact that is you either will have a brand new head coach or you'll have Mickey there without the interim tag. So you're going to have brand new somebody up there as a head coaching title that without an interim tag for the first game of the season that's on the road against a Big Ten conference of the likes of PJ Fleck, more than likely. Which I can't wait till we get to Minnesota. I cannot wait to rag on PJ Fleck.
Not only that, though. I mean,
he grinds my gears.
I mean, the other thing is like Thursday. That's such a short week for practice, and I mean, I'm guessing they'll have stuff that comes the week before too. Whoever's coaching, it's mind-boggling to me. Thursday night. I don't know, just does not inspire a great feeling in me at
At least
all.
it's not week 0.
That is true.
Yeah, I am happy with that.
Well, what I told Nate is the first stat that I saw was like, this is the third time in Nebraska football history they've ever started a season back-to-back road games, ever. The second positive spin zone you could look at it is after the first 2 road games, you only have 3 more away games the rest of the season.
Mhm.
So plenty of home games outside of the first 2 road games. After you get out, like whether you come out of that 2-0, 1-1, or 0-2, you don't have to go on the road like pretty much except for those 3 games, and one of them is the second to last game of the season. So
Yep.
that's a good way to look at it. Is you have the only 3 more times you have to travel. The rest you get everybody else at home. So just another spin zone of looking at the schedule. Obviously, thankfully we don't get Ohio State. So I mean you get Michigan, but you don't get Ohio State again. So
I was just gonna say, like, this schedule is also, in a way, I mean, obviously year to year is different, but this is pretty favorable for whoever comes in. It's not the Ohio State gauntlet. It's not the 2021 gauntlet
Right.
that we had either.
Mm.
So I mean,
I like to
it's
think of it as Kevin
manageable.
Warren had, heads you get Minnesota on a Thursday, tails you get Ohio State, and maybe we won the coin flip that time. I don't know.
Well, and then after that, we get to go heat up another old rivalry and go to Colorado.
That won't be as bad
Ooh.
if Colorado's as bad as they are now.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm
they'll
sure
get
it
a
will be
new
if you go
coach,
to the
so-
game.
Well, yeah. But I mean, if obviously we're not any better, but I mean, if Colorado is arguably worse than us, for sure, at this current moment. But I mean, if they're still as bad as they are now, I mean, that game might be better next year for us, despite having to go to Colorado. But
I don't know. It's next year looks like a pretty decent schedule. I will be excited to see
I'm
how we
not
play against
mad
Maryland too.
about it.
Mhm.
I am. I mean, I'm mad about the Thursday night.
Well, outside of that, but like in terms of who we play, I mean, I'm not mad about it at all.
No, not at all. Well, and then I think it was did we talk about this on Twitter where they had the graphic wrong for our
Yes.
Oh no,
Uh-huh.
Yeah, the first initial graphic they tweeted out was like we played Minnesota on Saturday and then we also played Iowa on Saturday. I was like, did we get screwed out of the Black Friday game because of the NFL? And then they tweeted out like 30 minutes later the correct schedule.
And the Black Friday game, I was so upset if we had lost that. I mean, I knew there for a while that was potentially going to, or that did happen, or I don't remember exactly.
And it still might happen. I mean, the NFL started to like the idea of playing Black Friday games after Thanksgiving too. So, I mean, if you're if you're CBS, ABC, or NBC, well, I guess it would only matter to us for CBS and NBC now that we have their deal. But I mean, if you take like CBS and NBC and you're like, oh, here's an NFL game versus Nebraska, Iowa on Black Friday, they're like, yeah, NFL 10 out of 10 times, always. So
yeah,
that's something like we have to, that might possibly happen in the future too, is, we might get butted out of a Black Friday game because the NFL now wants to play on Black Friday as well.
Yeah. And my argument was I used the Black Friday game to talk smack with my family members that have spouses and stuff from Iowa. But I guess that wouldn't necessarily change if it was on a Saturday either. But I still just Thursday? Why do we have an opening Thursday game? That's so dumb. I mean, I get it, but it's
I don't
dumb.
remember. Was it who played this year's? Was it Indiana Penn State? I don't remember who this year's Big Ten Thursday night game opener was, but it was that or was Illinois and Indiana. I feel like it was Penn State and Indiana. But I'll look it up. You guys keep talking. I'll get back to you on that.
I just either way,
was
like
it Penn State Purdue.
Oh yeah. It was Penn State
was
Purdue. Because I remember watching. I was like, oh man, how good does Purdue look? And then Penn State had that. Or did Purdue win that game? I don't remember who.
Penn State.
One of them had a game-winning drive.
Yeah,
but it was like a really bad game-winning drive. And I was like, oh man, the Big Ten is not off to a good start.
Well, yeah, when you got 45-year-old Sean Clifford in there playing quarterback.
Yes,
and then
it was.
46-year-old Aiden O'Connell. Like, good
That's
Lord,
right.
guys,
'Cause it's like
graduate.
it was 35-31. I was like, oh man, Penn State looks awful this year if they had to do a game-winning drive against Purdue.
Man.
And we saw that worked out.
But
Purdue is obviously better.
no, I think overall this schedule is really good for whoever comes in to take over for coach. It's not easy. I'm not going to say it's easy because the Big Ten really is, in my opinion, never easy. But if the teams stay, the way they are now, then the road to success for Nebraska may not be as long as we think. Could see some success pretty quick, provided the teams stay the way they are. So we will see. But with that, I mean, unless you guys got any final thoughts to discuss upon, I figure we can just jump into the Illinois game. I know we got a little bit to talk about there with them coming up on Saturday. So,
Yeah.
Andy, I'll pass it on to you. What you got?
Yeah, so like we mentioned before, this coming Saturday, 2:30 afternoon game on primetime ABC. So super fun stuff for hopefully not embarrassing ourselves on national TV type of game. But going into this one, I think Nebraska will arguably face their toughest defense in terms of stats. I mean, literally, Illinois is the number one overall defense in the country, only allowing 221 yards a game, which is, like I said, first in the country. Overall, they are only allowing 143 passing yards a game, which is second in the country, and only allowing 77 rushing yards a game, which is second in the country. So, literally on paper, Illinois is the best defense Nebraska will face this year. So this is kind of one of those where I thought this game would happen kind of in Iowa, to where like obviously Iowa's defense was really good, still is good this year, except for the Ohio State game. But I thought that game would kind of be like, oh, our big play offense versus a big play defense. We're kind of gonna get that here now, where our offense is probably it's top 50 in the country, but obviously not as big as we want them to be. But they're literally playing number one Big Ten West team, Illinois right now, top of the conference in terms of the West standings. But they are really good on defense. Mickey said it in his presser. They don't do a whole lot of things, out scheme you or anything. They just play physical and tough against you. They're going to play a lot of man coverage, so it's going to be interesting to see. Are they going to double up Trey in terms of coverage? And if they do so, Mickey had said like they're gonna have to rely on Washington, Alante Brown, Volkolek, even Anthony Grant or one of the running backs out of the backfield to kind of step up and make a play when we need them to. If Trey is going to be double covered all day, I'm sure Whipple's thought about that too, and they're probably still going to try to scheme to get around. If Trey's being covered, they're going to try to scheme around that to hopefully still get Trey the ball. Because, I mean, obviously we have said Trey is still our best playmaker on offense when we need him to get the ball. But I'm sure Whipple's thought about that as a way to scheme around getting out of double coverage if that's what they're going to put on Trey when they want to give Trey the ball. And like Mickey said, if that's the case, you're going to need one of your other receivers and other playmakers to step up, because this might be a game where we might see that for the first time. Going up literally going up on paper against the best defense in the country right now. And that's just their defense. We haven't even talked about Illinois' offense, who has literally the number one running back in the nation. He's got 1,059 rushing yards right now, which is the top of the NCAA, like the FBS standings right now. So our defense, no surprise, is not really good at stopping the run. So that kind of terrifies me a little bit. We saw what a walk-on running back did to us against Purdue, so I can't imagine what the nation's leading rusher is going to do to us. I hope
Not
we're
good
wrong.
things would be the answer to that question, Andy.
Not good things is right, unless we somehow surprisingly have the best defensive game in our lives and stop him. But Illinois is kind of the same boat as Purdue, not as pass heavy. Obviously they lean on Chase Brown to manage a lot of their offense, but they also have a veteran quarterback there who Mickey said, is not going to make very many mistakes, kind of like O'Connell does. So that's kind of one of those things is, Illinois got a lot of right pieces in the right places right now. And obviously it's showing that they can prove and be a good physical football team, which is just another staple of Brett Bielema. Like obviously he proved that at Wisconsin, kind of proved it at Arkansas, but Brett has experience in the Big Ten being a physical, well-coached team. And that's what we're going to get with Illinois Saturday. Offensive wise, Illinois is just kind of top 60 team in terms of production. Obviously, they run the ball a lot more, and obviously they should. So when you're running back, you're going to do that. Passing wise, they're not really a top tier team in terms of passing. So I think that is one of my keys to the game. Is this game is if you make Illinois pass the ball, you probably have a better chance. Or kind of the opposite with Purdue is like if we force Purdue to run the ball and not pass the ball because you're shutting down the pass, you have a better chance to win that game. Obviously, that didn't work out. But I think this game is a perfect example of if you make Illinois pass the ball, you probably have a better chance of trying to win the game. I think so. That's one of my keys. Another one of my keys to this game is I think this is a game where we're probably going to have to rely on our defense or special teams to make a couple big plays, whether that be a blocked punt or an interception, fumble recovery for a touchdown, or some sort of special teams kickoff, punt off, like punt return magic that happen. I think we're gonna rely on our special teams to make a couple big plays this game. And that's solely going off of just Illinois being a very stout defense and a physical defense that if we can't get anything going on the ground, if we can't get anything passing, I mean, it might be a slog of a day for our offense against this defense. So that's kind of a couple of my keys to the game is, make Illinois pass and, hopefully we have a couple big defensive plays or special teams play that kind of help give the offense momentum if the offense is kind of stuck in its ground. If they can't get Grant going, if they can't, give Tacey time to pass, I mean, you might have to rely. It might be an Iowa type game. You might have to rely on your other facets of the game. That's not your offense to help you win the game. So that's what I got. My initial thoughts on offense, or I guess just the game right now in general. So I'll pass it to Nate.
Yeah, I think you summed it up really well. Illinois is going to be a really solid team that I don't think we were necessarily prepared for at the beginning of the season. I think a lot of people had written Illinois as more bottom tier of the Big Ten. And so it's definitely surprising to see. Certainly, I mean, good for them for being able to show out this year. And I think their only loss is Indiana, right?
Yes, and that was the
Which
first or
is
second game of the
strange,
year.
but
I know that might have been Illinois' first game of the year, so that was
It's their
kind of a
second.
fluke. Or second, yeah.
okay,
Illinois
So
opened with Wyoming.
that's right.
gotcha. Yeah.
So that
So
could be also just a chalk up to they're still early in the season, trying to figure out where you are as a team type game. And obviously they winning 5 in a row,
mhm.
they've proved that they can do it.
Yeah. But that means that there's at least a recipe for success to beat them out there.
Mhm.
And so hopefully the coaching staff was able to watch some film on that and maybe glean some ideas from that game. But yeah, it's definitely going to be a tough one. I've heard or seen a few different places that I don't know if it's official necessarily yet, but there's at least some Heisman hype around the Chase Brown kid, which I mean, rightfully so, leading the nation in rushing. Looked like he's been a pretty solid
we
rusher too, so.
historically have I mean we always go back to like we historically have not done well against Wisconsin running backs, and I mean once you go against Melvin Gordon and Jonathan Taylor and Braylon Allen, you kind of get your quote unquote butt kicked a lot. So this
Yeah.
this is what I fear this game might teeter on is you might get gashed by the nation's best running back for 300 yards.
Might?
So might.
Might?
I hope we don't, but this is where I fear this kind of game might go is you might get gashed in by another one of a staple running back type games where before it was always just Wisconsin because we'd never do well against Wisconsin running backs. We still might not do well against Braylon Allen, but I fear this game might teeter kind of on that ledge as well.
Yeah. And then there's obviously the do you sell out to stop the run and then let the transfer portal, probably 5th or 6th year quarterback, beat you.
Mhm.
And it's going to be a tough call, and be interesting to see kind of which way we decide to go with that, or if we try and play imbalanced and see if we can just hang with them. But that might be our best option, is trying to win a shootout, I guess. But time will tell, I suppose, there. But I'll go ahead and pass it over to Zach quick for any of his thoughts on the game.
You guys did a pretty good job of summing everything up, so there's not a whole lot I want to touch on, except for what I thought was going to be a nice little, positive for us, or advantage, I guess, was that we had a bye week. But then I went and looked, and so did Illinois. So I guess that probably doesn't make a difference. But it'll be nice to come off that break, I think, for the guys. And I do think we'll see a more rejuvenated team. And I do think that Illinois. One is, it's wild they have the number one defense in the country. That's just something, and that is not a discredit. That is
the
not a
number one
discredit
country.
to them. That is awesome. Like, a Big Ten team has the number one defense in the country. That's not like your typical guys. That's credit to them, obviously. Brett, if you're looking for a job, I think Nebraska's hiring. Just wink, wink. But beyond that,
May hate the guy, but boy, does he prove like he's proven to win.
He's I would warm up to him a heck of a lot faster than someone like PJ Fleck. Let's be honest. But
100%.
But the other thing, I while we were discussing before we started the podcast tonight, I started looking just to see, because we had those first few games that really skewed the numbers for our defense. And so I was like, under Bill Bush specifically, how many yards have we allowed total? And so, I mean, I don't know I don't know if it's the same way they do it. I assume it's just an average. But Bill Bush and his defense have allowed 356 yards, on average per game, which isn't great, obviously, but better than the skewed stat of 471 that we have now. Granted, Oklahoma and Georgia Southern definitely didn't help those, but unfortunately those go on the stat book. So I wanted to see like how Bill Bush specifically was doing, and 356 is a heck of a lot better. I mean, that's 100 extra, 100 less yards comparatively to the whole year. Now it's probably not necessarily a good indicator of everything, because it's only been 3 or 4 games, but it is nice to see. One of the other cool stats that I saw is that Illinois is getting on average 26 points per game, and we're getting 29.7. So now what's really helping Illinois in that case is they're only allowing 8.9 per game. So this is going to come down to one of those ugly Big Ten games again, by far.
I didn't look up that stat, but I'm sure they're probably number one in points allowed a game.
I
mean, 8 points is 8 or 9 points a game is probably number one in the nation. I'm sure
they're basically holding them to a touchdown and a field goal, or 3 field goals.
If
like,
that.
That's it. Yeah. Like, that's crazy. Yeah. So I mean, I personally think it's going to be an ugly Big Ten game. I think the break will help, and I think we'll see a much better Nebraska team than we have in the past, especially since Illinois has had our number, it seems like, for the past couple of years.
Every team has had our number.
True, but I mean, it's like Illinois went from being suddenly one of the teams that we were like, oh, Nebraska should beat them, to now we're like, oh, okay, now we're up against the number one defense in the country, a top half offense. It's going to be different. It'll be interesting to see how we scheme around that, since our defense is, a little deflated.
Oh yeah, they're number one. Georgia's number 2 at 9.1 points per game.
Oh man, that's close.
Michigan's third with 12. But yeah, Illinois is number 1.
Wow. So anyway, yeah,
they've given up 62 points total.
Jesus.
Long way to say that I think is going to be a tough battle. At minimum for me, what I want to see is just a good team fight. I don't expect Nebraska to come out and play like lights out and have the upset of the century by any means. I would love to see it, by all accounts. I don't expect it to happen, but should be interesting. And I'm
Give your
just
prediction
hoping,
while you're there.
Yeah, I was gonna say with hoping for a fun game. So with that, I'm going to add my prediction. I think I don't think Nebraska covers this one, unfortunately, at 7.5.
It's a tricky spread too.
Yeah,
Considering we were 14 to Purdue.
I think Nebraska's going to have a good couple fire drives, but I don't think they're going to have enough to overcome. And I'm going to say 34-17 Illinois. I'm off the Kool-Aid for now. I'm off the Kool-Aid for now, so 34-17 is what I'm going with. Andy,
God,
I will give it to
that's
you.
a good score. That's a really good score. I like that score. I agree.
Long and hard about it.
I agree with you that we'll have a couple good drives. We'll probably have a couple of those nice Mark Whipple staple scripted drives that do really well, and then everything else after that is kind of what are we doing type drives. Yeah, I do see ways for us to win this game. I truly do. If if we can get through their defense and we make a couple of big defensive plays, whether that is a defensive touchdown or turnovers that lead to points or like a special teams touchdown, I do see a way for us to win this game. But at the same time, I also look at, we couldn't run the ball against Purdue and they were not as good of a defense as Illinois is. If Nebraska cannot get the run game established, I don't see a way for us to get any sort of momentum on offense. And like Mickey
Screw
said,
it.
like
Trey Palmer down there somewhere.
yeah, like
That's
I mean,
what
yeah,
they'll do.
if that works, like obviously keep running it, keep working it. But at the same time, Illinois, the rest of these teams going on from here on out are going to be like time of possession teams that are just going to run the ball down your throat until you force them to stop them, and we cannot do that. But prediction wise, I will go. I don't think it'll be high scoring. I'm going to go. I like the 17 for us, so I'm going to go 28-17 Illinois.
Okay. Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. I think really the only way we stay in this game is if we somehow make it a shootout. I don't think our defense is going to be able to stand up to Chase Brown too much. And if they do, I think Tommy DeVito is going to be more than capable of being able to throw the ball around to some open receivers. So, unfortunately, I'm going to have to go thinking 31-20.
Okay.
I think we'll come around to make it look like a close game, but I don't think it'll be a particularly close game, unfortunately. So
I would love to pull off the upset, and like I said, I feel
Absolutely.
there are ways for us to win this game, but
Illinois is beatable, that's for sure.
if we just look at the reality of what we have seen from this team versus how good on defense Illinois is, it's one of those like you come back off the Kool-Aid to reality and be like, oh yeah, this is what. Like I should have stuck with my gut of predicting Purdue to win in the first place, but then I chucked the Kool-Aid at the end.
You're welcome. Always give in to peer pressure, kids.
And didn't it feel good when you did that?
No, considering my score was actually kind of close to what the actual score was.
I was just talking before the game. We're not talking about after.
Well, yeah, of course.
All right. Well, any last minute thoughts you guys want to throw in?
Go Big Red as always. Despite how sad it makes me, but as always,
by 90, baby.
Always scores by 90.
Nate, you got anything else?
Not too much. Hopefully by the Minnesota game next week, I'll have found a little more Kool-Aid. But...
So
funny how that will dries as the season goes on.
Yeah.
So there you go, Mickey. Give us some more Kool-Aid to chug down. We'll be good to go. But all right. Well, with that, I think we're going to wrap up our episode here. Want to once again thank everybody for listening. Thank you for those that submit questions and topics for us to talk about. And if you want to get in on that, please check us out on Facebook or Twitter. Or YouTube or wherever you do your socials. We're on at least most of them. I don't know if we're on all of them, but please check us out at Nebraskabilities Podcast or Nebraskabilities Pod. Just look for that name. It'll be easier. It's our name schemes are kind of odd on there because our name is so long. But anyway, please connect with us. We appreciate all of the input that everybody's giving us. And with that, I will leave it off with, as always, if it's a possibility, it's a Nebraskability.